Star Wars, the expanded universe. A universe so vast that has over 17,000 characters from various different eras, from Dawn of the Jedi to the Old Republic, to the prequels all the way to the Legacy era. This is the tale of over 17,000 characters throughout the Star Wars universe. This is our first step to a much larger world that exists in the Star Wars universe. This is the story beyond the movies. This is the story of the Star Wars expanded universe. A universe loved by many. A universe that helped shape what this franchise is today. This is their story.
Hello everyone, Dark Sonova here. This time, we're going to review the Jedi Academy Trilogy. Something I've been wanting to do for a while, but I didn't get around to it. The first one being Jedi Surge, the second being Dark Apprentice, and the last one being Champions of the Force. All written by Kevin J. Anderson. Now, there are mixed opinions about these books among Star Wars fans. There's those who love them, like me, and those that hate them. I do believe it is unfortunate that these books kind of live in the shadow of the Thrawn trilogy, because these were released, after The Last Command came out. So I think people's expectations were a little too high, in my opinion. And also, I believe a lot of people don't really give these books enough credit, really. Because the Jedi Academy trilogy, without these books, the expanded universe would have been just like any other universe out there. It was Kevin J. Anderson's idea for everything to be one continuity. The comics, the novels, everything. So, this was the first occasion of continuity. Not only do these books mention the Thrawn trilogy, it also mentions Dark Empire, which Star Trek Expanded Universe never did that. They never mention events that happened in other books unless it's written by the same author or a comic. They didn't have the multimedia thing that Star Wars did. And this, to me, is what shifted the difference between the Star Trek universe and the Star Wars universe. I believe that this is what made Star Wars the better franchise, actually. Because its expanded universe, everything fits. Not the movies, the comics, and the video games. It all started with Jedi Surge. This is one of the biggest pieces of evidence to disprove the notion that there's no continuity expanded universe, when this references events from the Dark Empire and the Thrawn trilogy. So it heavily indicates that it takes place after the events of those books. Also, if you have the Dark Empire book, I think it's the graphic novel. If you depending on the edition you have, I have the first edition. Kevin J. Anderson himself talks about what he was doing during the time he was writing the Jedi Academy trilogy, how he communicated with various different authors of the comics, and the novels. So they did communicate with each other, telling each other what they were doing in their novels and their comics, so their works don't contradict each other. And Star Trek didn't do that. Star Trek's novels were outworld stories. I guess that's what DC and Marvel fans would call them. You know, stuff that isn't canon. It has nothing to do with the events in the TV series. Well, here you actually had a universe that actually connected well with everything. The novels connected with other novels and comics and the movies. This was great. This is when the Star Wars Expanded Universe, I feel like, truly took off. Because anything pre-Thrawn trilogy wasn't really, I don't know how to describe it. They were more like Elseworld stories than they were part of the overall narrative. Star Wars, which explains why the earlier novels are S-canon. Same thing with the Marvel comics. I'm talking about classic Marvel, not the current Marvel Star Wars. So, as long as the events did not contradict the movies or other EU works, it was considered canon. I'm probably, I've maybe gotten some details wrong, but this is how important these books are. Now, how is the actual quality? I think they're good. I think the entire trilogy is good, even if the first one is a little slow. With the first half of Jedi Search, having Luke find, Jedi candidates and Han Solo pretty much, along with Chewie and Kip, trying to escape Kessel. And then when they successfully do escape Kessel, they find out that there's a weapons factory that's in the Mao, which would be used in New Jedi Order series as a place to hide, the Jedi children who aren't old enough to fight in the war. And they get captured by Admiral Dalla, and this is the first introduction to many of the super weapons that exist. Yes, the world devastators were referenced in the second book in the trilogy, but you had something that was ridiculous, like the Sun Crusher, which was so powerful it could destroy like an entire solar system. Which that was crazy. That's some of the things that the EU gets criticized for. Yet it's okay for the Starkiller base to be as powerful as it is. But sorry, couldn't resist. The second book in the trilogy, Dark Apprentice, pretty much, does focus on, Luke, him actually training his Jedi candidates, and Kip, training as well. And you find out that Kip is a troubled individual who had a pretty hard life and is angry and wants to destroy the Empire. And Exar Kun, who makes an appearance, and in this book, of course, he's foreshadowed in the first, and he manipulates Kip, to do the things that he wants him to do. Exar Kun, there wasn't much known about him at the time. He was an interesting character, I thought so. I wish to know more about him, but I'll have to read, the books, that focus on him, the comics, which that won't be for a while. There's also a subplot going on regarding what's happening with Mal Mothma. She's sick. What happened? Something happens where they're trying to find out what's the cause of it, what's causing her to be sick. And something happens with Admiral Akbar where he feels guilty over the deaths of innocents. He feels responsible, but he doesn't realize that one of his fellow Kamari were the ones that did it, but he's under the control of the Empire, which gets revealed. And another thing I really liked about this book, it gave a character, a minor one, like Admiral Akbar, a character arc. It gave him something to do, which one thing I really love about the expanded universe, characters that never had a chance to do anything in the films get something to do in the books. So they're not just, background characters. They actually have, an actual arc. They actually have actual character development, which is something Akbar gets. Which I'm going to talk about at the end of the third book. Which, there's various I would say I could break it down. The first half of the book is about Han, trying to stop Kip from basically with his rampage. Because at the beginning of the third book, he kills his own brother unknowingly. Akbar, along with Leia and Han, go to rescue baby Anakin from being kidnapped from the Empire. And the last part of the book is them going back to the Mountain Solution to basically free the slaves of Chewbacca, his fellow Wookiees have been stuck in the Mao for years, and then Kip basically, to redeem himself for his crimes, basically goes through a test Luke gives him to help destroy the Sun Crusher by ramming it into the Death Star prototype into a black hole and pretty much destroying the Sun Crusher for good, and Kip being accepted as a Jedi. In my opinion, these books are more about Kip than many of the other characters. I feel like this is one of the few occasions in the expanded universe, one of the first, that it focused less on the big three and more on the EU exclusive characters. Even though there are some problems with the Jedi Academy trilogy, I do feel like the good in these books outweigh the bad. And I feel like that skipping out on these books, you do yourself a huge disservice. Because I feel like Luke, his fuck-ups in the Jedi Academy trilogy, I do feel like make him a stronger character later on. It shows that Luke isn't infallible. And to me, I like my characters to be flawed. I like my characters, when they go through a character arc and actually learn something at the end. I feel like this arc, in general, is Luke's first step to be the great Jedi Master that he eventually becomes later in the timeline. I believe this proves, even someone like Luke still has a lot to learn. What makes this so remarkable, in my opinion, is Luke is rebuilding the Jedi Order with nothing. Even though at the time they couldn't really reference the prequels, considering the fact George Lucas had every intention of telling that story himself. Even though there may be a few minor contradictions, such as Yoda being on Dagobah for centuries, which I don't think that's a big deal, honestly. I still think that this trilogy is important to Star Wars history because I believe that this basically print a picture for the expanded universe to come, for it to actually become the great, multimedia franchise that Star Wars eventually did become. In fact, without these books, even the new canon, I'm not going to really talk about it, but it wouldn't be like it is if it weren't for these books. In Star Trek, eventually, sometime in the mid 2000s, they were inspired by the Star Wars expanded universe, and actually they started to actually incorporate what Star Wars is doing, have everything be in continuity. Even if the Star Trek novels aren't canon, they're still at least a continuity in the novels. The Star Wars expanded universe is something that's truly unique, and I believe the Jedi Academy trilogy helped create what made the franchise unique in the first place. Are they perfect? No. Are they terrible? No. I still think any Star Wars fans who's reading any post-Return of the Jedi stories shouldn't skip out on the Jedi Academy trilogy because of some flaws that they hear but people talk about online. Read these books yourself. I think Kevin J. Anderson doesn't deserve the hate that he gets for these books. I do think they're far better than a lot of people make them out to be. The Jedi Academy trilogy, to me, I would give it a good rating. It's not a masterpiece, it's not classic, but I still consider these good. I would recommend any Star Wars fan who's reading the expanded universe for the first time to read these. But don't do this until after you've read the Thrawn trilogy. To me, this is episode 8. Next time we talk about the Star Wars expanded universe, we're going to either talk about Chrism Empire, the conclusion of the New Jedi Order series, or Young Jedi Knights, if I finish that on the list I have. Next week, people, we'll talk about one of those 3. Later.